Let me begin with the symbol. Not a woman, not a fantasy, not a villain in disguise. The siren is older than language, older than desire, older than the first man who ever mistook longing for love. She is an archetype, a force that emerges whenever a man forgets the weight of his own inner world. Her face changes across history. One era calls her a goddess, another calls her temptation. Today she may appear as a quiet presence whose gaze lingers just long enough to make you question yourself. But none of these forms define her. What defines her is the reflection she awakens in you. The siren is the mirror of everything a man has not yet integrated, the echo of the softness he denies, the beauty he craves, the completeness he has not built within. And that is why her power feels supernatural. You are not drawn to her. You are drawn to the untouched chambers of your own psyche. She does not pull you into her world. She reveals how easily you abandon your own. This is the truth. Most men never slow down enough to see. The siren is not the trap. The trap is the man who approaches her without a center, without a sense of direction, without the quiet authority of someone who knows where he stands. She is not here to save you, nor to destroy you. She is here to expose the fracture between who you are and who you pretend to be. Every man meets the siren at some point in his life, not as a curse but as an initiation. Her presence asks one question, sharp and unforgiving. Will you chase the reflection, or will you finally face the man behind it? A man does not fall under the siren's spell because she is irresistible. He falls because something inside him is unfinished. When a man has not brought his inner world into order, he begins to project the missing pieces onto whatever carries the shape of beauty, softness, or possibility. Psychology names it projection, but in truth, it feels far older, like an instinct carved into the bones. Jung understood this when he spoke of the anima, the inner feminine that lives inside every man. If he refuses to face it, it does not disappear. It simply seeks a host outside him. The siren becomes that host. She becomes the screen onto which he casts his unclaimed tenderness, his hidden longing, his unspoken fears, his hunger to feel whole. And suddenly she appears almost sacred, not because she is divine, but because he has handed her the parts of himself he never learned to hold. This is why her presence feels magnetic. It is not her voice that captivates. It is the sound of his own suppressed desires rising to the surface. It is not her mystery that intoxicates. It is the mystery he has avoided within himself. When a man stands without inner grounding, every silent question inside him turns into craving. Every unhealed wound turns into worship. Every unfulfilled dream clings to the first figure who seems to offer warmth. The siren does not promise salvation. He imagines salvation and places it on her shoulders. This is the true danger of projection. A man stops seeing reality and begins seeing his own reflection wrapped in another form. And once that projection takes hold, he loses the ability to discern between who she is and what he wants her to be. The siren is not a spellcaster. She is a mirror that does not soften the truth. A mirror that shows a man that the longing he chases is not for a woman. It is for the parts of himself he abandoned long before she appeared. The fall never arrives with thunder. It begins quietly, almost gently. In the small places a man assumes do not matter. A skipped discipline here, a softened boundary there, a moment when he chooses comfort over clarity. At first it feels harmless. He tells himself he is simply opening up, allowing connection, letting life breathe a little. But beneath that softness, something shifts. The center that once held him steady begins to loosen. His purpose, once sharp, blurs at the edges. His routines lose their precision. His world tilts, not because she asked for anything, but because he has begun to drift away from himself. This is the first step of the fall. It is subtle, almost invisible. He stops listening to the deeper voice inside him and starts listening to the echo of her attention. He measures his worth through her reactions, her silence, her approval, her warmth. Slowly, his inner compass turns outward. What he calls affection is often avoidance. What he calls connection is often escape. A man who has not mastered his own solitude will always mistake distraction for love, and the siren's presence, amplified by his projections, becomes the perfect distraction, not because she intends harm, but because she illuminates the emptiness he never confronted. He begins to rearrange his days around her possibilities. He trades his own path for the hope of closeness. He sacrifices the very traits that once defined him, believing that softness will earn him security. Yet the more he gives, the less he feels anchored. The more he chases, the further he drifts from the man he once was. He does not see it happening. That is the cruel beauty of this stage. It feels like devotion, like vulnerability, like the beginning of something profound. But beneath the sweetness is a quiet corrosion. A man cannot offer what he does not possess, and when he gives her the power to define his emotional world, he is not loving her. He is abandoning himself. He confuses longing with loyalty, intensity with intimacy, surrender with trust. In truth, he has stepped off his own path and is now wandering in the territory of his desires, unarmed and uncentered. Every fall begins with this moment. The moment a man stops being the author of his life and becomes a character shaped by his hunger. The siren does not push him. He walks willingly, believing he is following love, while in reality, he is fleeing the parts of himself he no longer wants to face. By the time he realizes something is off, the imbalance is already rooted deep inside him. A man who once moved with direction now moves with hesitation. His center no longer feels like a fixed point but a shifting surface, bending to emotion, bending to uncertainty, bending to the fear of losing what was never his to hold. This is where the true cost reveals itself. A man without a stable inner world becomes reactive. He no longer chooses. He responds. He studies her tone, her pauses, her distance, searching for signs that will allow him to feel safe again. His strength is traded for sensitivity, not the mature kind born from awareness, but the fragile kind born from insecurity. What once guided him was intention. What guides him now is anxiety wrapped in desire. And the tragedy is simple. She has not changed. He has. When a man abandons his mission, everything else in his life begins to orbit whatever promises emotional relief. The siren becomes that gravitational pull, not because she asked for it, but because he has forgotten how to stand in his own gravity. His thoughts circle her. His energy bends toward her. The discipline that once anchored him weakens, replaced by anticipation and overthinking. His inner silence, once sharp and stabilizing, becomes noise. A man who loses his internal order becomes ruled by external signals. The imbalance grows. He gives more than he can afford. He reveals more than he understands. He hopes that vulnerability will buy him closeness, forgetting that vulnerability without boundaries is simply exposure. The siren's presence now amplifies his instability. She does not wield power. His fear of losing her wields it for her. He becomes agreeable, malleable, overly accommodating, not out of love, but out of the terror that her absence would force him to confront the emptiness within. And in this state, he mistakes peace for passivity, connection for dependency, affection for validation. He thinks he is fighting for her. In reality, he is fighting against the collapse of his own identity. This is the heart of inner imbalance. A man steps away from his path and assumes nothing will shift. But the moment he abandons his center, the world rearranges itself around his weakness. And the further he drifts, the harder it becomes to remember the man he was before he surrendered his inner throne. When a man drifts too far from his center, polarity begins to collapse. The charge that once existed between two people, the natural tension born from clarity and difference, begins to fade. Attraction is not sustained by effort. It is sustained by presence. And presence is impossible for a man who no longer inhabits himself. The siren archetype responds to this shift instantly, not because she wishes to punish him, but because an unanchored man no longer evokes the mystery, strength, or steadiness that first awakened her interest. What she once perceived as depth now feels like need. What she once felt as certainty now feels like dependence. The dynamic tilts. Energy that once flowed toward each other now disperses. Her warmth cools. Her curiosity thins. She becomes unpredictable, not out of malice, but because polarity cannot survive where a man has abandoned his own ground. Her distance is not rejection, it is a reflection. She mirrors back the instability he carries. She steps away from the version of him that lost discipline, edge, and orientation. She adjusts to the vacuum he created by softening his own spine. He senses the change but misreads it. He tries harder. He becomes gentler, more accommodating, more available. hoping that effort will restore what only alignment can sustain. Yet every attempt widens the gap. A man cannot negotiate attraction. He cannot plead his way back into respect. The more he reaches, the more the connection deteriorates. Because pursuit born from fear does not rekindle polarity, it destroys it. Eventually, the truth becomes unavoidable. The distance he feels from her is the distance he created within himself long before she ever pulled away. She is not drifting from the man he is. She is drifting from the man he stopped choosing to be. There comes a moment when the collapse can no longer be delayed. A man feels the ground shift beneath him, not because she has left, but because the illusion he built around her has finally cracked. What he thought was connection reveals itself as attachment. What he mistook for destiny dissolves into silence. This is the breaking point, the place where every projection snaps back into his hands. It hurts with a precision that no physical wound can match. But this pain is not chaos. It is ceremony, the end of a pattern that could no longer sustain itself. In the quiet that follows, a man is forced to face the truth he avoided. He sees how far he drifted from his principles. He sees the compromises he disguised as kindness. He sees the longing he called love, but was merely the fear of being alone with himself. This recognition is not cruelty. It is cleansing. The collapse strips away the roles he played to earn affection. It exposes the weakness he hid behind devotion. It removes the illusions he used to escape the weight of his own becoming. And in that exposure, something essential returns. The rawness of being a man without a mask. The solitude that reveals what still matters. The stillness that demands he rebuild from the inside out. Every man meets this threshold at least once in his life. Not as punishment, but as initiation. He cannot rise until something in him has fallen. He cannot stand firm until he feels what it is like to kneel before an illusion. The end he fears is not the end at all. It is the doorway back to himself, carved by the very collapse he tried so long to avoid. Rebirth does not arrive with triumph. It begins in the same quiet where the collapse left him. A man stands alone, stripped of illusion, stripped of projections, stripped of the fantasy that someone else could complete what he refused to cultivate within himself. In that clarity, something shifts. He no longer seeks to replace the siren or to reclaim what has passed. Instead, he turns inward, toward the territory he abandoned. He begins the slow work of integrating the parts of himself he once outsourced to another. The longing he projected becomes self-understanding. The softness he chased becomes self-respect. The validation he craved becomes inner steadiness. Discipline returns, not as punishment but as alignment. Solitude becomes a teacher rather than a threat. His focus sharpens, his boundaries strengthen, his breath deepens. A man who rebuilds from within does not seek attention. He becomes anchored, deliberate, precise. His presence grows heavier, not with burden but with certainty. The siren no longer holds sway over him because he no longer confuses her reflection with his identity. He does not resist her, nor resent her, nor worship her. He simply rises beyond the frequency where projection lives. And from that height, something profound occurs. Attraction no longer dictates his direction. Fear no longer shapes his choices. Loneliness no longer controls his devotion. He becomes a man who walks with himself first. A man whose center cannot be traded for affection. A man who understands that true polarity is born from wholeness, not hunger. This is the quiet rebirth of masculine presence. Not louder, not harder, simply unshakable. In the end, the siren was never the danger. She was the doorway. What drew him in was not her power, but the echo of his own unresolved longing. What broke him was not her absence, but the distance he created from himself long before she appeared. A man becomes whole the moment he understands this. He no longer fears beauty, nor desire, nor the pull of the feminine. He meets it with clarity, with grounding, with a presence that does not bend for approval or unravel under uncertainty. The lesson is simple, but it is carved through experience. Strength is not the absence of temptation. Strength is the ability to remain centered while facing it. A man who knows himself cannot be undone by what reflects him. He walks without grasping. He loves without losing himself. He stands without seeking permission, and when the next siren appears, as she always does in one form or another, he will not fall into the reflection. He will see it for what it is and continue forward. steady, deliberate, unshaken.